It was true. Both babies smiled when Esperanza walked into the room, always reaching for her, especially Pepe. Lupe was good-natured and less demanding, but Esperanza learned to watch her closely as she often tried to wander away. If she turned her back for a minute, Esperanza found herself frantically searching for Lupe. Esperanza rubbed Lupe's and Pepe's backs, hoping they would go to sleep soon. But they were restless and wouldn't settle even though they had their bottles. The afternoon sky looked peculiar, tinged with yellow, and there was so much static in the air that the baby's soft hair stuck out. "Today is the day of the strike," said Melina. "I heard that they were going to walk out this morning." "Everyone was talking about it last night at the table," said Esperanza. "Alfonso said he is glad that everyone from our camp agreed to continue working. He is proud that we won't strike." Irene continued working on the flour sack and shaking her head. "So many Mexicans have the revolution still in their blood. I am sympathetic to those who are striking, and I am sympathetic to those of us who want to keep working. We all want the same things, to eat and feed our children." Esperanza nodded. She had decided that if she and Mama were to get Abuelita here, they could not afford to strike. Not now. Not when they so desperately needed money and a roof over their heads. She worried about what many were saying. If they didn't work, the people from Oklahoma would happily take their jobs. Then what would they do? A sudden blast of hot wind took the flour sack from Irene's hand and carried it to the fields. The babies sat up, frightened. Another hot blast hit them, but kept on, and when the edges of the blanket blew up, Lupe reached for Esperanza, whining. Irene stood up and pointed to the east. The sky was darkening with amber clouds, and several brown tumbleweeds bounced toward them. A royal of brown loomed over the mountains. "Una tormenta de polvo! Dust storm!" said Irene. "Hurry!" They picked up the babies and ran inside. Irene closed the door and began shutting the windows. "What's happening?" asked Esperanza. "A dust storm, like nothing you have seen before," said Melina. "They are awful." "What about Mama and Hortensia and the others? Alfonso and Miguel? They are in the fields." "They will send trucks for them," said Irene. Esperanza looked out the window. Thousands of acres of tilled soil were becoming food for La Tormenta, and the sky was turning into a brown, swirling fog. Already she could not see the trees just a few yards away. Then the sound began. Softly at first, like a gentle rain, then harder as the wind blasted the tiny grains of sand against the windows and metal roofs. The dirt showered against the cabin, pitting everything in its path. "Get away from the window," warned Irene. "The dirt and wind can break the glass." The finer dust seeped inside and they tried to seal the door by stuffing rags under it. Esperanza couldn't stop thinking about the others. Isabel was at school, the teachers would take care of her. But Mama, Hortensia, and Josefina were in the open shed. She hoped the trucks would bring them soon. And the fields. She could only imagine. Alfonso and Juan and Miguel, could they breathe? Irene, Melina, and Esperanza sat on the mattress in the front room trying to calm the babies. There was no relief from the heat in the closed room, and soon the air was hazy. Irene dampened some towels so they could wipe the babies and their own faces. When they talked to one another, they tasted the earth. "How long does it last?" asked Esperanza. "Sometimes hours," said Irene. "The wind will stop first, and then the dust." Esperanza heard a meowing from the door. She ran to it and, pushing hard against the wind, opened it a crack. Isabel's kitten, Chiquita, darted in. There was no trace of her orange fur. The cat was powdered brown. The babies... The door opened again and Mama walked into the cabin, her skin covered with an eerie brown chalkiness, and her hair dusted like the cat's fur. "Oh, Mama!" "I am fine, mija," she said, coughing. Hortensia and Josefina followed, and Isabel put her hands on her cheeks in worried surprise. You look like raccoons, she said. All of their faces had circles of pink around their eyes where they had squinted against the dust. The trucks could not find their way to the shed, so all we could do was sit and wait, said Hortensia. We hid behind some crates and buried our heads, but it did not help much. Josefina took the babies next door, and Mama and Hortensia began washing their arms in the sink, making muddy water. Mama continued to cough. What about Alfonso and Juan and Miguel? Asked Esperanza. If the trucks could not get to us, they could not get to the fields. We will have to wait, said Hortensia, exchanging a worried look with Mama. A few hours later, Juan, Alfonso, and Miguel arrived, their clothes stiff and brown, all of them coughing and clearing their throats every few minutes. Their faces were so encrusted with dry dirt that they reminded Esperanza of cracked pottery. They took turns rinsing in the sink, the pile of brown clothes growing in the basket. When Esperanza looked outside, she could almost see the trees, but the dust was still thick in the air. Mama had a coughing spasm, and Hortensia tried to settle her with a glass of water. When the adults all finally sat down at the table, Esperanza asked, "What happened with the strike?" "There was no strike," said Alfonso. "We heard that they were all ready, and that there were hundreds of them. They had their signs. But the storm hit. The cotton is next to the ground, and the fields are now buried in dirt and cannot be picked. Tomorrow, they will have no jobs because of an act of God." "What?" "Mama, you're so pale," said Esperanza. Mama carefully walked into the cabin as if she were trying to keep her balance, and slumped into a chair in the kitchen. Hortensia was bustling behind her. "I am going to make her chicken soup with lots of garlic." She had to sit down at work today because she felt faint. But it is no wonder, because she is not eating. Look at her. She has lost weight. She has not been herself since that storm, and that was a month ago. I think she should go to the doctor. "Mama, listen to her," pleaded Esperanza. Mama looked at her weakly. "I am fine. Just tired. I'm not used to the work. And I've told you, doctors are very expensive." "Irene and Melina are coming over after dinner to crochet," said Esperanza. She thought that would cheer Mama. "You sit with them," said Mama. "I'm going to lie down until the soup is ready because I have a headache. Then after dinner, I'll go straight to bed and get a good rest. I'll be fine." She coughed, got up, and slowly walked from the room. Hortensia looked at Esperanza, shaking her head. A few hours later, Esperanza stood over Mama. "Your soup is ready, Mama." But she didn't move. "Mama, dinner," said Esperanza, reaching for her arm and gently shaking her. Mama's arm was burning, her cheeks were flushed red, and she wasn't waking. Esperanza felt panic squeezing her, and she screamed, "Hortensia!" The doctor came. He was American, light and blonde, but he spoke perfect Spanish. "He looks very young to be a doctor," said Hortensia. "He has come to the camp before and people trust him," said Irene. "And there are not many doctors who will come out here." Alfonso, Juan, and Miguel sat on the front steps, waiting. Isabel sat on the mattress, her eyes worried. Esperanza could not sit still. She paced near the bedroom door, trying to hear what was going on inside. When the doctor finally came out, he looked grim. He walked over to the table where all the women sat. Esperanza followed him. The doctor signaled for the men and waited until everyone was inside. "She has valley fever." "What does that mean?" asked Esperanza. "It's a disease of the lungs that is caused by dust spores. Sometimes when people move to this area and aren't used to the air here, the dust spores get into their lungs and cause an infection." "But we were all in the dust storm," said Alfonso. "When you live in this valley, everyone inhales the dust spores at one time or another. Most of the time, the body can overcome the infection. Some people will have no symptoms at all. Some will feel like they have the flu for a few days. And others, for whatever reason, cannot fight the infection and get very sick. How sick? Asked Hortensia. Esperanza sat down. She may have a fever on and off for weeks, but you must try to keep it down. She will cough and have headaches and joint aches. She might get a rash. Can we catch it from her? The babies? Asked Josefina. No, said the doctor. It isn't contagious, and the babies and young children have probably had a mild form of it already, without you even knowing. Once the body fights off the infection, it doesn't get it again. For those who live here most of their lives, they are naturally immunized. It is hardest on adults who have moved here and are not accustomed to the agricultural dust. How long until she is well? Asked Esperanza. The doctor's face looked tired. He ran his hand through his short blonde hair. There are some medicines she can take, but even then, if she survives, it might take 6 months for her to get her full strength back. Esperanza felt Alfonso behind her, putting his hands on her shoulders. She felt the blood drain from her face. She wanted to tell the doctor that she could not lose Mama, too, that she had already lost Papa, and that Abuelita was too far away. Her voice strangled with fear. All she could do was whisper the doctor's uncertain words. If she survives.